hearing from a lot of families who are overwhelmed in the beginning with a 40-hour program and not knowing how to squeeze in a life, and if they should be trying to squeeze in a typical life while we're going through that early intensive behavioral intervention. So I wondered if you couldn't give us some ideas, having seen so many families go through this, about how do you prioritize what things you do and what things you don't do, especially in the beginning of therapy.
Right. I think the first thing, really, we have to collaborate. I encourage all of the families to collaborate very closely with their supervisor. Their supervisor is going to know the program design. They're going to know what what outcomes and what types of strategies we're using, so that we can see the measurable progress that the child is making, and they can anticipate what types of things might occur if a vacation is coming up, or if there's going to be a holiday weekend, or whatever it may be. Obviously, each child is different, each program is different, and it's a case-by-case situation. But these are the types of communications that should be happening months in advance in preparation for any type of vacation or any type of time off from therapy. Early on, you had mentioned, what about early on in early intervention? I think that's extremely vital to make sure that, any time off is not too much, it's not too great. We're looking at the consistency and the behavior momentum of the child's program, a lot of different things that, that are critical in those early stages. By collaborating with the supervisor, we can do a lot of things, not only in preparation for it, but also prepare the families on how to work on behaviors, how to work on generalization of skills and the such while they are on vacation.
I think that that's such great advice, and I love that you said that you started the whole conversation with talking about the fact that it really needs to be the conversation with the supervisor, because no two cases are the same. It reminded me, and I had forgotten until just this moment, that when we were waiting to start therapy with Card, we were sitting on the edge of our seats, waiting. We couldn't wait for therapy to start. But I was also panicking because my niece was getting married. And all I could think was, oh no, we're going to start therapy, and then a week later, I've got to get on a plane for at least a couple of days to go to this wedding, because there was no possibility that I could not go to this wedding. It was that kind of a wedding. It was so important to me and so important to the whole family. But I was so worried about it, and I didn't want for Card to think that I wasn't serious about doing therapy. It was such, but I remember on the first day of therapy, it was going to be a week away. So we were starting, and a week later we were going to leave. It ended up being for 3.5 days. And I was so afraid that Card was either going to say, well, you need to cancel and not go to that wedding, or you can't work with us. And then what was I going to do? Because I was going to be panicked. And at that point, I still didn't know how powerful the therapy is. I think now, looking back on it, if that had been the case, if Card had said that, if I had known what the therapy was going to do, I would have had to cancel the wedding. My niece never would have gotten over it, but but that isn't what happened. They said, go to the wedding. You're going to miss these 3 days. We weren't missing a clinic. And so it worked out. But I'm hearing from a lot of families that they think that they should be able to cancel therapy for all kinds of things. That, and clinics especially, that they're like, well, I don't want to take my child out of school for a clinic. We've signed up for ballet classes, and the ballet classes are during clinic. And it breaks my heart, Vince, because I feel like those families are missing the point a little bit. What can you say to us to help us to understand how we should be prioritizing?
Right. It is a fine balance. I mean, we're talking a difference between family vacations, which I think are, usually once or twice annually, and those are prepared, and usually they're big events, and things like that take a lot of preparation. But when we start looking at the day-to-day stuff, and that starts taking the place of ABA therapy, then we're not prioritizing ABA over ballet or horseback riding or tutoring or swim lessons and those types of things. And what happens is then all of the services that we're doing are getting watered down, and we're oftentimes not able to meet the clinical recommendations for therapy. So, again, like any medical practice, we're making a clinical recommendation, which is our professional recommendation of the amount of services that are necessary for the child to progress and meet the goals that have been set for them and agreed upon by all the education or the funding sources. And by going below that level, we're expecting and we should be anticipating less results, less progress, and less effect with treatment, which is not what anybody wants. What I always talk to families is ABA sets the foundation. It sets the floor for all other services or activities to be successful, right? So ABA lays the foundation for the child to learn how to behave in certain environments, be able to cope with their emotions, being able to understand different situations, so that everything else will be enhanced. So they'll be better at speech, they'll be better at ballet, because they can attend better, they can listen to directions, they can follow multiple step instructions, those types of things. But without that foundation, without being able to have that ability to build on that, all of these other activities are also going to be only partially successful and sometimes very frustrating for the child.
Yeah, I thank you so much for bringing that up, because as we're talking about priorities, it really is an interesting thing that I know, being a parent, that there were things that I wanted Jem to be able to do, and I had this idea in my head of, we're going to play t-ball. And the t-ball schedule, it was not doable in the year that I wanted him to do t-ball. It just wasn't. It would have meant not doing therapy and not going to clinic. And so we chose therapy and clinics. And I remember in that moment feeling like it was something that we were saying goodbye to forever, when instead what happened was 2 years later, when he was able to play Little League, he was able to play on it was a totally included team. Everybody else on the team was typical, and he was able to enjoy himself. Sometimes we brought a therapist with us, and that at that point was a good use of the therapy, because the therapist was helping him with his interactions with the other team members. If we had taken him that first year, all he would have done was stood in the corner and spun in a circle, and there would have been no social contact, and we would have missed the therapy that actually got him ready for doing Little League 2 years later.
Right. He wouldn't have had the skills or the abilities to be able to really enjoy, really experience, really, take in and participate in whatever activity. In Jem's case, it's baseball, the way that we want them to, right? And I think sometimes we press that as a priority before it's time, right? Before it's ready. It's asking the child to run before they can walk. It's asking the child to talk, or to do a presentation before they know how to talk, those types of things. And I think it's a very similar paradigm, where if we're asking the child to perform, learn, experience a task or an activity or an environment before they're ready, we're setting it up to not be successful and to not be enjoyable for the child the way we want it to be.
So what can parents do? Do your best therapist maneuver on us, Vince. When we're at a crossroads and something's coming up and we're not knowing how to choose, is there like a decision tree that we can help ourselves to say, okay, well, I'm going to choose to do this now, or I'm not going to choose to do this now, and feel okay about that decision?
Well, and it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, is that's a great conversation to have with your supervisor, and go through the pros and cons. What are some of the sacrifices that would be that are going to come up with whatever that decision is? If it's a vacation, or is it an inclusion in a sport, or is it maybe a change in a school placement? Right, to sit down with your supervisor, and not just in one meeting, but over a few different meetings, discussing what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, so that at least it's an informed decision across the board, and everyone is comfortable with whatever the outcomes are going to be. Right, if it's increasing therapy, so that, but yet we're going to look at including at a different time. Again, addressing your point, saying that it's not forever. This isn't forever. Baseball is still going to be there. Dance is still going to be there. Let's get them ready for that, and then we can introduce that to them. Or if it's something that is extremely important to the family now, how to include them in that environment at the level that they're at, or at the level of understanding that they're at, to try to make it as successful as possible, even given the limitations of them possibly not having all the skills to be able to participate evenly.
So Vince, as we're talking about this, I'm wondering, since you've seen so many families over the years going through this kind of intervention, what kinds of qualities do you see in the families that get the most out of therapy? What do you see in them that would help the rest of us to know and to aspire to?
The qualities of the families?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it goes back to the openness and communication. I can't harp on that enough. Families that are willing to talk to the supervisors, are really open with their plans, ideas, thoughts, sharing and collaborating on what the family's individual priorities are, and then the supervisor being able to present and discuss the clinical priorities. That is very beneficial, because there's a lot of times where it's kind of the mind reading game. Well, you should know that this is important to me, or this is important to me because it's my culture, or my family, or my ambitions for my child. Those types of things, where when we try to get into that mind reading game, there's going to be a lot of mistakes, a lot of misunderstandings. And the thing that's very frustrating for us as clinicians is when these decisions are made without our input at the last minute, right? Oh, by the way, starting June 14th, we're going on a 2-month vacation. Okay.
Right.
No, we have no lead into that. There's no decision making tree. There's no discussion. There's no weighing the benefits and the costs of that. So
well,
again,
and maybe it would be worthwhile for us to just take a minute here to talk about if we were forthcoming and gave our team, and that's really how we have to think of it as a team, if we gave our team that information in March and said, look, I'll play the parent, you play the supervisor, and I say to you, hey, we're thinking about going on this trip and going to Hawaii. What are some things that conversation would entail that would help me as the parent and that would help my child?
Well, first, how long is your trip?
And if I said I'm going, we're talking about going for 10 days, but I don't know if that's too long.
Well, again, depending on the level of the child, I would discuss, okay, so you want to go, okay, what are some of the things that you want to do there? What are some of the things that Jem would be interested in, or what are some of the things that he could participate in? Because obviously level of understanding is going to be different.
Right.
So then we discuss that, and then we discuss, okay, so his behaviors. How comfortable are you going to be managing his behavior solely without the therapist being there 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week? Do you feel comfortable with that? And then we go back and forth. We would set behavior intervention plans. Make sure we got 2 months now, right? Or 3 months. Make sure that you guys are really doing it at home, really feeling comfortable with it, so that when June comes and you're going to go to Hawaii, we've already worked together for 2 months, 3 months up till then, so that you're feeling confident in your skills. You feel confident with the goals that we're going to set just for that vacation, to make sure that he experiences some of the trip at his level. And then this way you go and you're leaving with a bag of tools, a bag of strategies on how to work with him there, rather than going with a blank playbook and not knowing what to do.
And see, that's really what I wanted them to hear, Vince, is that when we as parents will let you guys in and think of you as a team, that what we get back is that you help us to be prepared, so that not that you're sitting there saying don't go on that trip, but that you find ways to get us ready for that trip. That's what that communication provides.
Absolutely.
Which is invaluable.
Absolutely. Everybody promotes vacations and holidays and taking time off. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It's making sure that it's effective and it's not going to permanently alter or disrupt their treatment plan. But a 10-day trip, something like that, absolutely, with enough preparation, we can make sure that trip is going to be as successful as possible. At least within our capabilities. So that the parents feel more confident, you feel more energized, you feel more confident as you go on that plane or on that train or in that car, that this is going to be good. This is going to be great. Your anxieties go down. which means we're going to be better prepared, and that's going to be a much more enjoyable trip than going into the trip very anxious and unprepared.
Well, Vince, I've loved this conversation because I thought going into it that this was going to be about us setting our priorities and then sticking to them. And instead, what I walked away from this conversation with is that the number one priority is to communicate with our team. And I think that's a powerful, powerful thing.